Welcome back to the latest episode of TT Plays. My name's Sung Soo. Franklin is right behind me, and we are going to speculate and talk about the upcoming ban and restricted announcement. Now, those of you who know me from other games know I'm not huge on speculating, but I do think it's an interesting turning point and kind of worth talking based on the things that the Weebs have kind of teased out there, things that we know, and information that they've given us. So while I've never worked on a balance committee for a card game, I have done it for two competitive miniature games in the past. And it's always an interesting thing, right? There's always a bunch of different reasons you could look at banning or restricting a card or unit. And part of what we don't know is really don't understand the mindset of the Weebs kind of heading into this, right? Now we have this announcement from them here, and it says, hey, there's going to be a BnR update on October 16th, which is just a couple days away from this video. So we know one is coming. Now, they haven't really done much in the past, but they do basically give us these categories along with a brief explanation. I think that's really cool. I love the transparency. So category 3 is basically stuff, hey, this stuff's banned, this stuff's restricted. It's too good, but nothing's there. Cool. Category 2. This category contains cards that we consider very problematic and are heavily watched for future potential legality changes and category shift. Okay, and we have Sword of Avarice, which I know is hot off a lot of people's mouths, and we have Reckless Conversion, which was a menace in the Dawn of Ashes meta and in Fractured Crown. I think to speculate would probably come off this category 2 list, right? And then we have these cards in category 1, and this is pretty interesting. We have Creative Shocked, Tactful Sergeant, Varric, and Freezing Hail. And in this one here, the one that they posted in August, they don't really go into detail. But if we go back to the June announcement, they give us these wonderful run-throughs of why these cards are here. And again, this is what is really cool to me, right? So many developers don't give you this insight. And Weebs has kind of given us this door, this glimpse into what they're thinking for upcoming things. So Sword of Avarice, when paired with Spirit Blade Ascension, has proven to be a very effective strategy, allowing Lorraine players to draw a lot of cards in a single turn. With the card recursion that Crux has access to due to Cruxite, the potential for card momentum is very high. Card momentum is a term we use to describe too many usable cards within a single turn. When it's too high, it leads to drastically increased turn durations because new cards were not part of the consideration the players have done with their hand and memory in previous turns. Sword of Avarice's overall strength also limits design space for flicker effects like Spirit Blade Ascension and Zephyr. So that's really interesting. What they're talking about, right? They mentioned two things here. One is the pressure of turns are going to take too long, right? And again, in the very beginning, I talked about there was all sorts of reasons that we could look at banning or restricting something. They then kind of go into its overall strength limits design space. And that, right, I could paraphrase, and paraphrasing isn't good, but like maybe it's just too strong. Okay, so they've given us two reasons that they would possibly consider banning or restricting a card, and that's really cool. Now, if we jump down here to category 1, again, I'm not going to read the stuff about Reckless Conversion, but it says, first we'll talk about Creative Shock and Tactful Sergeant. These two cards have been too effective in output and that can only be used by too many decks. Sorry, I read that incoherently, but I think you understand what I was saying. Right now, we feel that there's a fine element, right now we feel it is fine that an element has always certain always include cards, because there's always been one set released. However, we predict Creative Shock will be used in too many fire decks, and Tactful Sergeant will be used in too many attacking class wind decks in the future, even as more and more sets release. Okay, now they've given us a third reason, and that's the always include or ubiquitousness of a card where it's just going to be in every roster because the card is just so good. Doesn't matter if you're a mage, you're a warrior, you're an assassin, this card is too good. So we have, from their own mouths, 3 cards and 3 reasons that they would consider banning something. Okay, now we can kind of take that and we can apply it to the very little information we have. And this is Luxera's map. If you haven't gone to Luxera's map, you definitely should. It's probably our best collection of data. And the first thing I want to highlight for why I don't think we need to ban or restrict anything is we just don't have that much data. We just don't have that many games. When we compare the amount of data points we have for Grand Archive compared to what they get from Magic the Gathering or Warhammer 40k or even Flesh and Blood, right? Those are magnitudes larger because they have that many more players. So again, I feel like it would be really early to end up hitting something with a hammer here. But if we're going to talk about it, again, there's a couple different reasons. I don't want to get into the overpowered stuff because that's all really subjective. I do want to talk about the ubiquitousness. And one of the things I've heard floated out there is Lorraine 1 is too good. And that's a really interesting idea. And obviously, there are only 4 starting heroes. And Lorraine's an interesting one because Lorraine is used for a bridge in most of these Merlin matchups, right? In the top 32, only 5 lists didn't have Lorraine level 1 in them. And they were basically Xander, Rye, and then this Wind Merlin list that used Rye for their level 1. So Lorraine is very, very common, right? Very ubiquitous. The issue is like, can you ban a starting hero? Like, can you just take one of kind of the pillars of the deck building out? That seems really aggressive to me. The second thing we talk about there is Sword of Seeking was in all but 4 of the top 32 lists. And you can find this all here under the top 32 breakdown. They don't have that information there, but they have all the lists. And I literally just went through all the lists and categorized them in an Excel spreadsheet. So all but 5 of the lists had Lorraine. All but 4 of the lists had Sword of Seeking. Now, Sword of Seeking is an interesting one that we can look at possibly banning, right? That allows us to keep this warrior for the warrior classes we can. It removes a really powerful weapon, right? One that eliminates True Sight, so it's really popular into the Dream Fairy. The fact that it's 2 durability allows for you to swing for it, and then these Merlin players right here on turn 3 or whenever they level up, right, immediately have that Spirit Blade Ascension target going. So I do think if we're going to consider something, my personal feeling would be Sword of Seeking needs to get evaluated. But again, I personally believe the meta is very healthy and in a really good place. If we want to talk about Lorraine more, we certainly could. I just don't know what would happen to all those different decks. When we look at the conversion rate, if you look at the full meta breakdown here, compared to the top cuts here, right? Lorraine converted at a 22%. That means if you played Lorraine on day 1, you had a 22% to make the top 32. Merlin converted at a 17%. Rye converted at a 13.7%. Xander converted at a 7%. And, well, we're just not going to talk about Sylvie. So obviously we know Sylvie needs a buff, but they're not going to fix that in a ban restricted, right? So the other ones, when we really look at it, right, we have Xander at 7.7, we have Lorraine at 22, Merlin at 17, Rye at 13.7. I don't feel like that's an unhealthy spread, right? When we tally up the underdogs there, Rye and Xander, right, we basically have the conversion rate for Lorraine. Now, again, if you want to talk about Lorraine also being in the Merlin conversion, that's fine, but that doesn't actually improve her conversion rate, right? That brings it down. So again, for conversion there, we have Lorraine at 22, Merlin at 17, Rye at 13.7, and Xander at 7.7. I think that's a fine, healthy spread, considering how few heroes we really have when we talk about level 1 heroes. The next discrepancy we can talk about is the elemental breakdown. Now, top cut here, that's just 8. Here's 32. And again, you kind of like sum all these together, but I'll do it for you, right? Fire had 126. Wind had 53, and then water came up last with 27. All right. I mean, where do we really take that? And really what we can do is like, we basically converted at the proper ratios. Like nothing was really out of whack where fire was converting magnitudes higher than one of the other elements. So if we want to ban something for ubiquitousness, like if they come out and say we want fewer fire players, okay, we could look at doing that. But again, they're all kind of converting at the same rate, and people are always going to have preferences towards different things. Fire, again, I'm drastically paraphrasing. You guys play Grand Archive, right? Fire is aggro. A lot of people like it. Fire grows real fast. So again, I think it's just going to draw people to it from a playstyle standpoint. You also have the benefit of fire being quick and people like myself being worried about going to time in these larger events. So the elements are chosen in a disproportionate amount, but they're converting at roughly the same amount. So again, I personally think that's really healthy. So elemental disparity is in pick, not in conversion. Hero conversion, there is a disparity where Lorraine is basically converting at almost 3 times Xander, but Lorraine is only converting at 5% more than Merlin. Lorraine and Sword of Seeking are definitely the most ubiquitous cards, kind of regardless of what you're playing, but it's worth mentioning there are staple cards and everything. Yes, is Creative Shock in every fire list that I looked at? Absolutely, and we looked at all top 32. I didn't look at the 207. I don't have the time for that, right? But Swift Recruit was in every wind deck. So again, it's like, right? Zephyr was also in every wind deck. So there are these ubiquitous cards that weren't mentioned on their list, which again comes back to me. It's like, we just don't have enough data. Luxera's map has been running this for as many things as they can get their hands on, but we're just not showing that many large events here. We haven't had that many events. So to me, again, banning and restricting something would be premature. At the end of this, and the devs know what's coming out in Alchemist, I think that would be a great time to do it. But to me, the meta is still developing. The meta is still kind of evolving, right? The people over at True Champion have shown us this incredible wind list, and we've yet to see kind of what the meta can bring to balance that in. Like, do I believe there are things out there that people hadn't considered? Sure, the same way that 40 plus allies deck was living out there, and we just hadn't really discovered it yet. And I'm hopeful that they kind of let the meta develop, let it breathe a little bit, and they're not too heavy-handed. But again, we'll see what happens. They know the game way better than I do. But again, elemental choice, disparity exists in choice, not in conversion rate. Hero conversion rate. Lorraine is definitely converting at the best at 22. Xander's the worst at 7.7. Ryra's converting at 13.7. Merlin conveying at 17%. Sylvia obviously needs some help, but we're not really going to fix that in a BnR. All these conversions I'm talking about is just coming from this one event. We just don't have a ton of data here, right? So these numbers are coming from the one large event, and I know we have some other events coming in the future, and hopefully those events get to breathe and experience kind of a good, healthy meta here. The last thing I'll say is, like, my personal feeling would be something like Sword of Seeking, which again impacts Lorraine, regardless of if Lorraine is your end goal or just a stepping stone. And it has a huge impact on the top 32 lists, right? So to me, this kind of hits things naturally. It does impact Avarice without being as heavy-handed as hitting Avarice itself. So who knows? I have absolutely no idea what they're going to do, but I'm excited to see what they have coming up, especially because store championships are right around the corner. And if your store hasn't applied yet, you should definitely check out the upcoming store championships. If you click over to articles, I apologize for not having this up with the store champ. That's not the right one. I apologize. I should have had this up already. We have regionals here, and we have the store championship application. And if your store hasn't already, I definitely recommend them get this in there, right? Store championships are going to start on October 29th, which is just a few weeks away. And this basically just walks through how your store is going to apply and this gorgeous Tithe proclamation that you can try to win. So again, we have this upcoming BnR on the 16th. What are they going to ban? What are they going to restrict? I have absolutely no idea. I personally am happy with the meta. I think it's really healthy. I love playing in it. And I'm excited to see what more people dojo and kind of pull out of the weeds. Because again, we just haven't had that much time going. If someone put a gun to my head and said, hey, you have to pick something, A, that's a pretty messed up thing to do. And B, I would probably lean towards Sword of Seeking, which helps bring Lorraine just down a little bit without absolutely crumbling it or cratering it or anyone who wants to play Warrior. So I hope you found that beneficial. I hope you found that helpful. Let me know what you think needs to be hit in the BnR. Let me know what you think of the meta. You know, Grand Archive is new to all of us and everyone has different opinions on this. I do want to recommend Mark's channel here, Solar Games. He had a great interview with the devs where they talk about the Fractured Crown meta and they also talk about Proxy as Vault, where the Vault isn't going to be used to change cards, is what they alluded to, but it's going to be used to add things to it, to the game, to kind of balance it out, right? Nullifying Lantern, I think, is a good example, right? They recognize that they needed something between basically their Kickstarter printing and the altar printing. They talk about something that fixes the water mirror, which can make that take less than 2 hours. So, hey, that's really cool. So if you want to know more about the devs' understanding, read the articles that I went through before and check out this interview that Mark did on Solar Games with everyone down in the Ascent. So I hope you're still enjoying Grand Archive. I hope your store got a store championship. Let me know in the comments what you think should be hit. And again, thanks for watching. And until next time, everyone, cheers and happy gaming.